Hello, I'm Pip Courtney. Welcome to A Taste of Landline. And I hope you had a great Lammy Australia Day.
When you go to a restaurant and you see your product, you think you made it. That's probably the highlight of my farming life, I reckon.
Pomegranates.
Get all those seeds out nice and quick.
And Maremma Guardian dogs. Hello, I'm Prue Adams. The small Australian pomegranate industry is dominated by one big player. The biblical fruit is increasing in popularity, but it hasn't been an easy ride for the fledgling industry.
So today I'm going to make you a superfood salad with some lovely pomegranate to finish off.
Pomegranates are something of an it food right now.
Get all those seeds out nice and quick.
The zesty, slightly sweet, slightly sour, dark pink seeds are included on the menus of some of the country's top restaurants. And TV cooking shows have fuelled a demand from those who want to try them at home.
And then you have it, our superfood salad. Have this, add some bit of grilled chicken thigh with it, some hot smoked salmon, feta cheese, happy days.
The funny thing about pomegranates is they are really not new at all. Many of us would have grown up with a tree in the backyard, and they're something of a staple in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The United States is a huge exporter of the fruits. Europe, a big consumer. Australia, frankly, has been pretty slow to pick up on the flavour punch of pomegranate.
The pomegranate is an ancient fruit. It's been one of the 7 biblical fruits, but it's still got a lot of work to do and a lot of information to get out there for the Australian market.
Based near Shepparton in Victoria, Australian pomegranate growers, trading as PomLife, has harvested around 1,500 tonnes of fruit during the season, which lasts from March until early June. More than 100 hectares of the trees represents a multi-million-dollar investment. But like many horticultural enterprises, it started out as a fruit grower's desire to diversify.
Well, about 10 years ago, my brother and I were local fruit growers. We were looking for another crop that we could get involved with. Everyone's always looking for the next crop. And some people said to us, pomegranates are something we should be thinking about. So we made a couple of trips to Israel, which is where we were told was where commercial production is the place to see it. We'll just have a look at this stuff here, Eddie. Looks to me like the pickers are getting this about right.
Having visited Israel, Shane Hall thought the scope of the pomegranate potential was too big for a couple of small growers. So he got together with some financial backers and PomLife was born.
As a private company, a few of us invested the money. We acquired the land, planted the fruit, and basically take care of what we call our babies every year.
That's an indication of how strong a tree is.
Joshua Riveni is one of a handful of marketers, growers and agricultural specialists on the company's management team.
I grew up having the fruit since I was a child, and coming to Australia and not seeing the fruit so readily available was a bit strange to me.
Australians consume around 5,000 tonnes of pomegranates a year, about half of which is currently imported from the United States. Increasing local demand while reducing the reliance on imported fruit is the goal for PomLife's Melbourne-based CEO, Wayne Turner.
We've got to the stage where after 8 years we're about 50% of what our crop should be like, but we've done a lot of work with changing varieties, putting in new plantations and working that. So we'll do about 1,500 tonne this year, but the maximum yield on this orchard should be around 3,500 tonnes.
Has it been a steep learning curve?
Oh, huge, huge. When you see a new product, quite often the things you see first are the positives. So you plant the trees, this is going to be all good, and then the negatives become apparent.
Despite their reputation as a hardy plant, farm manager Shane Hall says it can be tricky getting the fruit just right.
This is beautiful. The sugars are fully developed in this one. This would have a very high acid and low sugar. So they need to get to this maturity to really be the product that we want to produce for people.
There are 3 different varieties of pomegranates grown here, all taken as cuttings from the best trees in the orchard and nurtured in the on-site nursery. The fruit matures at the end of March, but the company is aiming to extend the season by trialling varieties that can be harvested much earlier, in January. At this stage, it's mostly hand-picked, then carefully placed, so as not to bruise, in specially manufactured, controlled atmosphere plastic bags. There are no mechanical harvesters in Australia designed for pomegranates, so the company is trying out a mango harvesting machine on a section of the orchard as a first step towards reducing labour costs. The fruit is dipped in fungicide to improve storage and shelf life. PomLife adheres to a formula known as whole fruit marketing. It basically means none of the pomegranates go to waste. To make sure the most is made of each piece of fruit, it's individually scanned and analysed, checked for blemishes, size and colour, so it can be appropriately graded.
At the moment, we ran about 6 tonne an hour. It can go up to 8 tonne, 10 tonne an hour.
Okay.
But it's all predicated on what's coming through as a grade 1 and the volume that comes through the sorting and packing at the other end.
The first grade is boxed for immediate sale, while the lower grade product is put aside for further processing. So what percentage of the fruit is second grade or worse?
Probably somewhere around 40%.
That's quite a lot. That's quite a high amount.
It's quite high percentage.
In the on-site refrigerated processing plant, the seeds, or arils as they're called, are punched out of their skins. They're sorted to make sure there's no bitter pith and packaged into plastic containers for sale as a value-added product.
It's not like we're a farm gate grower. We want to follow the fruit right through to the consumer and then try and take as much costs out of that supply chain to, one, meet the needs of the consumer, but also to make sure that we've done this properly.
PomLife also produces a pure pomegranate juice, one that's not based on concentrate. Even the skins have a purpose.
Currently it's used for stock feed, and we are looking into the potential of developing the product, being high in antioxidants, so it's got a lot of other attributes we can utilize.
Despite the demand for pomegranates outstripping domestic supply, it's a crop which hasn't been able to get much of a foothold.
Testing. It's been a testing fruit. It's been a fruit you fall in love with. There's something about the pomegranate that it does get hold of you. I've enjoyed it, even with the testing times.
It's got quite a long history, for instance over 150 years. There was 40 factories at the turn of the century, and this one at Rocky Point is what we call the lone survivor.
It could become the Indianapolis, it could become the Daytona, it could become the Le Mans, and it should be.
Hello, my name's Fiona Breen. An ambitious last-ditch effort is underway to repopulate Victoria's grasslands with a critically endangered tiny marsupial. A groundbreaking new plan will see the eastern barred Bandicoot released back into the wild with an animal bodyguard, a shaggy Italian breed of guardian dog. In mainland Australia, you'll only find eastern barred bandicoots at places like this, the Werribee Open Range Zoo in Victoria.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who's met a bandicoot and not fallen in love with it, because they're just such amazing creatures, and they are just such sweet, gentle creatures. They're our local Victorians. They're the ones that we should be seeing when we're out driving at night, and the ones we should be having in our own backyards. But without safety from animals like foxes and cats that were introduced here, we just don't see them anymore, and they just can't survive out there. Her fur's in wonderful condition too. That'll keep her warm.
Now, the only wild population is in Tasmania, and it is critically endangered. The irony of this little critter's diabolical situation is that it is an incredible breeder. These tiny creatures have a remarkable reproductive system with a pregnancy that lasts just 12.5 days.
They have one of the shortest known pregnancies of any mammals, and they have this rolling system where females are generally either pregnant or with pouch young, and that means that they can have up to 5 different litters a year.
All previous attempts to release some of them into the wild on mainland Australia have failed, but these dogs are being asked to become environmental saviours. In an ambitious plan, Maremmas are being trained to protect the eastern barred bandicoots when another population is released into grassland in Victoria's western districts in about 12 months' time. The Maremmas are renowned for their ability to bond and guard other species.
It's mainly their presence with the livestock or in an area that helps keep predators away. Because, I mean, you can imagine the Maremmas are pretty big dogs. They weigh 40 kilos plus sometimes. And if this big dog is just present with the livestock and it just moves around there the whole time, barks, makes its presence known, the predators are going to stay away. And if any predator does approach the area or the livestock, I mean, the dog is very alert, so they'll see it coming, they know the predator is there. And if you're just a small fox or even a wild dog, and this big dog is running towards you barking, well, you're not going to stay there, are you? You're just going to move off, and you're going to leave the stock alone.
Ecologist Linda van Bommel has worked with and studied Maremmas for the past decade. She'll be monitoring the effect they have on foxes and other predators at the release sites. Because the bandicoots are small, nocturnal and shy, the Maremma pups are given 2 different animals to bond with, bandicoots as well as sheep. The theory is that the Maremmas will have the sheep to focus on during the days and the bandicoots during the night when the sheep are sleeping.
We've got a bunch of puppies at the moment. They're all sort of in the middle of their training, but they're coming on really well. They're exhibiting the behaviours we want. They're bonding well with the sheep. They're nice and calm around the bandicoots as well. So fingers crossed, it's all heading in the right direction.
Using Maremma dogs in conservation is not a new thing. It's worked before in Australia. Dave Williams was involved with a successful conservation effort to protect penguins on Middle Island in southern Victoria. He's now managing the Eastern Barred Bandicoot project.
We've had some success with them regarding penguins, little penguins, down at Middle Island, and then after that we had some success using them to guard gannets at Point Danger down near Portland. So I guess we're applying
the technique to bandicoots now, which is a little bit different, but it's all started off with the agricultural use, so it's a new application of an old idea.
That old idea started with a farmer. For a decade, Alan Marsh, or Swampy as he's called, used his maremma, named Oddball, to guard the chickens on his free-range chicken farm just inland from Warrnambool. He thought if Oddball could protect the chickens, maybe she could protect the island's penguins too.
It's in them. It's their own innate sense of territory that's there. You don't have to train them. All you've got to do is provide them with the opportunity to do what they do naturally.
It was Swampy Marsh who suggested the radical solution to the local council.
A simple answer to a fairly complex problem. And I think it's really good that we've got a European dog protecting Australian penguins from European predators. I reckon that's great. That's rough justice, but I reckon it's fair enough.
Oh, hello, beautiful. The plan actually worked. Foxes stayed away and the penguins thrived. Guardian dogs are considered by some to be the best way of protecting not only native animals but also livestock. A survey of 150 farmers with maremmas found that they thought they were the best way of protecting anything from sheep and cattle to chickens. Linda Van Bommel has written a manual for farmers on how to train and keep guardian dogs. It's not always easy. They're independent thinkers and can be aloof to most people.
Most people here in Australia are used to herding dogs like the Kelpies and the Border Collies. They are very, very different.
Fingers crossed, this unique breed of dog will guard this critically endangered native marsupial back into existence in the wild on mainland Australia. And if it does, it could mean there's hope for some other species teetering on the brink of extinction.
From flying aeroplanes to sailing boats to chasing cattle through the scrub. If you live in an island environment like this, you end up with 1 foot in the seawater anyway, and it's a sort of a natural progression of things.
Hello, I'm Kerry State. And now to that old sheep meat, mutton. And it's not just any piece, but dry-aged mutton. A technique that until recently has been largely used in the beef industry. But there's now growing interest in using the old-school method to give mutton a modern-day makeover. In the Great Southern region of Western Australia is a mixed farmer on a mission to give mature-aged sheep a leg up.
I've got a dangerous passion. I don't look at anything else except playing around with bloody sheep.
While the memory of poor quality mutton during war times left a bad taste in the mouths of one generation, David Thompson says the time is now right to appreciate what these older animals have to offer.
3 years ago, I was on a flight across to Dubai, and it was interesting. I could hear the hostesses saying, "Would you like the chicken or the mutton?" And people would say, "Yes, I'll have the mutton." And it was sort of like a light bulb moment that mutton's not such a bad name. And these are well-heeled type of people. They've got money to spend, and they were happy to take the mutton. And to me, that was, I think, well, let's do it. Let's do something with it.
Someone else who thinks it is worth doing is South Australian producer, processor, winemaker and now restaurant owner Tim Burville. He's one of the biggest advocates of bringing back the old art of dry aging, where meat is stored in low humidity, near freezing conditions for several weeks. While this beef has been through that more traditional process before it's packaged up, most meat these days goes straight into vacuum-sealed bags in what's known as wet aging.
It's only in the last 5 years or so that dry aging has come back. I'd never tasted it before we started on this adventure, and we started dry aging in a small room. We made lots of mistakes in the beginning. The meat went mouldy, we had to throw a lot of meat out, but we've been doing it now for 5 years, and the product just gives you an amazing increase in flavour and tenderness.
From a consumer perspective, it comes down to taste.
We'll taste 4 different cuts, some wet aged, some dry aged.
And that's what these tests are about, with a series of focus groups judging the dry-aged lamb, hogget and mutton, along with standard wet-aged lamb. One worry was the dry-aging process would make lamb, a meat renowned for its tenderness, tougher. Some also thought the process would accentuate the strong flavours that have traditionally turned consumers off sheep meat, especially mutton. But Tim Burville says the opposite happened.
What we found was that the dry-aged sheep meat products were all higher in the positive attributes and lower in the negative attributes, particularly things like the metallic and livery characters.
Were you surprised by any of the findings?
Oh, massively, yeah. The one that I was most surprised at was that hogget and mutton were more preferred by the tasting panel than standard lamb. That was a significant finding.
Australia is the largest exporter of mutton in the world. 95% of what's produced heads offshore, with the Middle East and China the major markets. While the current price isn't as low as it has been, it's a long way behind what lamb is fetching. But the MLA says consumers would be willing to spend an extra 20 to 30% on dry-aged mutton based on the results of the trials.
We know that there's over 3 million mutton and hogget processed annually here in Australia, and we believe if just 10% of that mutton and hogget could be dry-aged, that would add approximately $3.5 million per annum to the Australian industry. Adoption now is key. It would be a shame that if all this work was done, that no producer or processing company or retailer or food service adopted this know-how.
Tim Burville has certainly adopted that know-how at his restaurant in Adelaide, adding dry-aged mutton to the steakhouse's menu after a 6-week trial. The yield losses are slightly greater than in the beef the restaurant dishes up, but he says there is money to be made.
You'll never see dry-aged product as down at your local pub for a $10 meal. It will always be a high-end niche product. But certainly there's little doubt in my mind that this is a viable product.
We've just had 3 restaurants 2 days ago wanting to come on board, so what we just need volume, that's all.
One of the restaurants he supplies to is the Cabin on the outskirts of Perth.
You don't want it too full either, because when you go to...
There are no chops or racks on the menu here. Instead, Chef Adam Giddings presents the dry-aged mutton in less familiar ways, making chorizo and pastrami out of it.
I was taken back by the taste, and I was also really inspired or taken back by David's passion for his product. The passion he shows for his products really comes out in the final product that we're using.
Hey there, Adam. Mutton delivery.
As for the farmer, dubbed the Mutton Man in restaurant circles, it's been a lot of hard work and a costly exercise to get the product he's passionate about to this point. And while turning it into a sustainable business is still a work in progress, he says the returns and rewards make it worth the effort.
We get a good price, yes, yeah. But the most exciting thing is when you go to a restaurant and you see your product. It's you think you made it. It's really, really good. That's probably the highlight of my farming life, I reckon.
It really draws you, every bit of you, to keep going. There is beauty in drought, as hard as it may seem, but sometimes you'll see the earth's cracked and there's been a little shower of rain and there'll be just one little piece of green coming up through it, and it's like a piece of artwork.
Well, that's the program. Next week, a real treat as you meet a fantastic couple who are shearers cooks.
It astounds me even still sometimes, because you'll get people that just, you can't fill up.
The Outback Oasis.
I just love the blower. I love putting out a little bit of Roundup.
And the bounty of Queensland's scenic rim.
I hope that when people think about food tourism in Australia, they'll say King Island, Scenic Rim, Margaret River, all in the same sentence.
And don't forget, you can catch us on iView, Facebook and Twitter. I'll see you next week for a taste of Landline. Bye for now.